So, how do consumers find out about all of this buyer agency, seller agent, how do they figure all that out? Well, I do have one other handout for you, and that is the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure. And so, you'll see this brochure has a number of different things in it. And in fact, you don't have to give them a brochure that looks just like this, which is kind of a trifold thing. So, when I'm laying the hand out like that, I know me. I might forget about those things. So you'll see, if you look in this, it talks about how sellers agents work, and how buyers agents work, and how dual agents work. And so it gives the clients a little bit of information about how we can work with them. And this brochure is to be delivered to somebody at first substantial contact. First substantial contact. We talked about that the other day. This happens when we go from property to people, right? And they start talking about their family or about things that are important to them, and not just talking about the property that they're looking at, then it's important to make sure they get this brochure. And if you're not face-to-face with them, sometimes you'll have a client that is out of town, and they want to establish agency with you, or they want to talk to you about a house, something. So if that's the case, you can deliver it within 3 days, and you can deliver it by fax or by email or any number of different ways. And once they've received it, they're supposed to acknowledge that they've received it. So there's this little flap that tears out, and it says that agents are required to review this with you and must retain this acknowledgement for their files. This is not a contract. By signing, I acknowledge that the agent named below furnished a copy of this brochure and reviewed it with me. And they sign it, and print their name and then sign it and date it. Seems pretty simple, doesn't it? But you'd be surprised. You meet somebody for the first time, and they want to tell you about, what their situation and so forth, and you shove this brochure in front of their face and say, I need you to sign it. They're likely to say, I ain't signing that thing. So, really, people get hung up on this whole working with real estate agents thing. The fact is that in any kind of sales situation, you have to disclose who you're working for, and make sure that they understand this stuff. So you disclose your relationship. I'm working for the seller, and talk about, let's say, for instance, we're at an open house, and they come to the open house. The first question you're going to want to ask them is, are you working with a buyer's agent? Because if they are working with a buyer's agent, do you need to go through all of the various forms of dual agency and designated agent, all that stuff? No. You still need to give them the brochure to make sure that they understand that you're working for the seller and so forth. But you don't have to go into a long, drawn-out explanation. The next thing is, if they say, no, I'm not working with anybody, you ask them, well, what do you think of this house? Because if they say, I hate this house, this isn't going to work for me, may never show them another house that's with your firm, especially if it's a smaller firm and you don't have that many houses in the market. So it may not ever be a dual agency situation, right? And so you want to establish that before you waste all those words, right? The thing about it is, what you want to say to people is something that conveys that you care about it. Because remember I said that agency is about a relationship. And so by starting the relationship on the right foot, you're in much better shape. And so, for instance, a buyer comes in to an open house and they start talking about their family and so forth. You probably are going to want to say, let me just stop you before you go any further, before you tell me anything more. I just want to make sure you know that I'm working for the firm that has this house listed. And I don't want you to tell me anything that could harm you if you decided to make an offer on this house. Again, we're establishing a trusting relationship from the start. And then we go on to say, if you're not working with a buyer's agent, I could certainly help you with that. But I just need to make sure that you know what the ground rules would be and so forth. And then you can go into more details. But again, stopping them before they tell you something that's going to hurt them is really important. You go to a listing appointment and they say, well, we're interviewing 3 agents for this listing. That's fine. It's perfectly fine. I just want to make sure that you don't tell me anything that could hurt you if you chose a different firm to list your house or a different agent, because I might have a buyer for this house somewhere down the road. And if you told me things that would hurt you in that transaction, it would not be a good thing. So I want to protect you from that. So don't tell me anything that you wouldn't want a buyer to know. So again, you're starting that conversation and establishing that. So you don't have to get too hung up about, oh my gosh, they're not going to want to sign this and so forth. If you do it properly, you sort of ease them into it. And I could probably count on one hand, on 2 fingers, the number of times people have said, I ain't signing nothing, right? Because I hadn't warmed them up, I hadn't established that relationship enough yet. But let's say that they do say, I'm not signing this. What do you do? So you put a little note that says, refuse to sign, and then you put the date, and you say, would you initial that? And they say, I ain't initialing nothing. So then you put refuse to initial, and you put the date, and you tear it off, and you put it in your file. You've done everything that you could do, right? But you have given them the brochure and talked about it. So that's about all you can do, really. It doesn't have to be this. You can have an electronic version of it. You can do fax, whatever, but it has to be exactly these words, okay? And most, like for instance, Allen Tate has a whole online form thing. So when I write up a contract, I don't actually get out a piece of paper. I do it on the computer. And we have the Working with Real Estate brochure as part of that. And so we just print it out. And so it looks a little different than this, but it has exactly the same words. And so that's the critical thing there. All right. Any questions about that?
That disclosure of sub-agency, so do you get that, do you check that every time? Like, or is it just certain situations?
So you talk with the buyer and they say, well, I don't want to work with you as a buyer's agent. You can work with the seller. You can work for the seller. So that would be seller sub-agency, right? That's when you check that box. And you say, okay, I just need you to initial this. So it says, when showing you property and assisting you in the purchase of the property, the above agent and firm will represent the seller. So that's one choice they could make, is I'm not working with you. I'm not doing an oral buyer's agency agreement, I'm not signing any buyer's agency. You have to say, well, I have to represent somebody. I can't represent nobody and get paid. So it would be seller sub-agency, and that's when they would check that box and initial that.
So if you're at an open house and, you have a conversation and you put this in front of them, well, you may not do that. Nah, probably
It
wouldn't.
depends, yeah. If we get to first substantial contact, then yeah, we would give this to them. Now, does that mean that they have to decide that day whether they're gonna work with you as a buyer's agent? No, they just have to be fully informed.
So that check can be checked later on.
Yes. Yeah, so if a week from then, they said, you know, I thought about it, I really don't need a buyer's agent, I can represent myself. Say, fine, okay, here's the little flap that we did the other day, and I just need you to check that box and make sure that it's fully informed. That's a pretty risky situation. I need to know that anything they say, I have to tell the seller if it's gonna help the seller. So they have to be very well informed. So again, disclose your relationship, explain how you might work with them. They won't sign it. You just try to get them to initial that they aren't signing it, but maybe not. And then get them to make a decision about how they might work with you. They may not make that decision that day. Again, especially with buyers, sometimes they just need to be courted a little bit before they are ready to do that. So if they choose that seller sub-agency, you want to explain who you will not represent, which is them. And you have a duty to disclose all information to the seller. And if they have buyer's agency and they want to terminate it, that has to be in writing, right? And so if they turn around and say, well, you know, I was going to work with you as a buyer's agent, I signed buyer's agency, but I changed my mind. I don't need you to work for me. That's fine, but everything I've learned while I've been working with you as a buyer's agent, I now have to tell the seller. Just want to make sure you understand that, and that we get this in writing that they're making that choice. Same thing for the sellers. When I'm sitting down with them, I would go through kind of a similar thing. But you know, to be honest, most of the time when I'm listing a house, especially the longer you're in business, there's not usually competition. You know, so when you first start out, you're almost always going to have competition, and they're interviewing 3 agents and that sort of thing. But as you go along, maybe you have more referrals, so your friends and your family and your neighbors and all them, you're not gonna have quite so much to do as far as agency, because they call you up and say, I want you to list my house land. You know, it's more of a formality to get this signed. You still have to do it, but you're not worried about them deciding not to work. What kind of transactions need the working with real estate agents? Brochure, only sales transactions. So if you're doing rentals, you don't have to do working with real estate agents. So first substantial contact, you want to give them the brochure, review it with them. If it's a listing agreement, they need to have that in writing before you do the listing agreement. An oral agreement is allowed for buyer's agency, dual and designated, but must be in writing no later than the first offer presentation. An exclusivity or definite period must be in writing as a buyer's agent. I think I'm going to skip that for now. So as a broker working for a company, the most important thing to remember is that as an independent contractor, their broker can't tell you what time you have to come into work every day, what time you have to leave, that you have to wear a uniform or something like that. Although Century 21 used to have these gold jackets, and that was a big deal for a gold jacket. I can't imagine that today, but broker controls what but not how business is done. So the company is going to have certain rules about how they will operate, whether you can be a designated agent, for instance. How you do your business, what your business model is going to be as far as prospecting and advertising and things like that, they don't control that. There's a lot of discussion about employee versus independent contractor, because there's some firms that people do act more like an employee. And if you're acting like an employee, then you are an employee and you can't go by the IRS rules for independent contractors. So income is based on sales production, commissions. We're 100% commission. One of my first classes, I was talking about, how we work as independent contractors, and I said, for the most part, we don't have benefits. If you have benefits, you buy them because as an independent contractor, I own my own business, literally. Wayne Young Realty, Inc. And so if I'm going to have health care, for instance, at least at this time, I have to arrange for my health care on my own. Now, it just so happens that I married a nurse who works for Cone Health Systems, and that is a huge blessing because I can be on her health care system, right? So they're working on some options that that realtors that are part of an association would be able to be part of a bigger association for health care. But it's not there yet. We have, Alan Tate has some retirement things, but you have to have worked there for a while and you have to have a certain amount of production in order to take advantage of it. So you're still your own company, so you're not going to get a salary every month. And so you have to be prepared for that. In one of my first classes, somebody didn't come back after the break, and I was like, what happened to so-and-so? And they said, well, when she found out she didn't get benefits, she decided not to become a realtor. Maybe we should have explored that a little bit before signing up for the class. But there's a lot, that maybe we don't find out ahead of time. You're starting a new company when you go into real estate, for the most part. Now, some brokers do work for the firm, like for instance, for a builder. You could work for a builder and get a salary. You could be a property manager for a big property management company and perhaps get a salary for that. But for most of us that are doing general brokerage, we're independent contractors. All right. So that's all there is for Chapter 7. I'm going to take a little bit of time to get into Chapter 8. And to start with, I've given you a copy of the current listing agreement. And just for grins, there are approximately 20 sections to this agreement. 20 sections, 1 through 20. And so, let's see. I want you to open up your textbook to page 192. 192. And this is the listing agreement that's in your textbook. Look at the bottom of the page. It says Standard Form 101, revised 7/2016. So the contract that they have in here was the contract in July of 2016. What does this one say? 18, right? And they've made some changes. So just for fun, this first row, I want you to look at sections 1 through 4, and I want you to compare those sections in the new contract to the old contract. See if you can find any differences. This second row, look at the next 4, 5 through 8, and see if you find any difference. The third row, 9 through 12. So sections 9 through 12, see if you can compare those two. The fourth row, 13 through 16, and the last row, the last 4 sections of the contract. So check out the differences between the new contract and the old contract and tell me what you find. You can just put a little star by it or whatever. We'll just take a couple minutes and take a look at that. You can work together, that's fine.
Yeah, never mind. Sign.
So 17, 19. So 12.
All right, so you don't have to find all of the differences, but just to get a sampling of how things change over time, just in 2 years. And in fact, every year, there's some changes to the contract. Things are tweaked, added, so forth. So let's start with the first few sections, 1 through 4. What'd you find that was different?
Nothing in 1 and 2, and then when you get to 30, where it says fixtures and exclusions, the A, items leased or not owned, is not part of the new, on the new piece, we didn't get to 40.
All right, so number 3, the fixtures and exclusions, they've changed the format of it, haven't they? They made it a lot easier to find the stuff that's included there. It's in alphabetical order, so you're thinking, well, what about the garage door openers? Are those included as a fixture? Yep, garage door openers and all controls. when I first got into the business, stoves, slide-in stove and oven were considered personal property. But now, are slide-in ovens considered personal property? Now, you'll look under the second one, all stoves, ranges, ovens, built-in appliances, attached microwave oven, vent hood are considered a fixture. They're part of the house, right? Also, when I first started out, one of my first deals, when the buyer went to move into the house after the closing, they went into the bathroom and all the bathroom mirrors were gone. Okay? Because at that time, it was a fixture if the bathroom mirror was permanently affixed to the wall. If it was hung on a nail like a picture, it was considered personal property. Now, because I was new to the business and didn't know all the ins and outs, I didn't think to look behind the mirror to see if it was permanently affixed or if it was hung on a nail, and it was hung on a nail. And my buyer was not happy. This was a pretty expensive house, and there were nice mirrors in that bathroom. They got over it, but I almost had to buy a bunch of really expensive mirrors. All right, anything else? See any other differences in that first four sections?
Purple box around those.
The purple box. Yes, they want to make sure you know that governmental authority over taxes, zoning, school districts, utilities, and mail delivery may differ from the address shown. So we want to make sure we know. And they want you to complete all applicable descriptions. Right? Is the home address, is that enough to tell you which house you're dealing with? No, because sometimes it's, 2311A and 2311B. It can be very confusing. I've even seen a house where it was like 2300 was one house and 2300A was the house next door. So that, that can be really confusing. Okay, how about the second group, 5 through 8? Was there any differences there?
Yeah.
No differences whatsoever.
That's what we saw.
All right, you guys lucked out, huh? Okay, how about 9 through 12? Find any differences there?
Yeah, there's a big huge note section added in 10 on the date, material marketing dates.
Okay, this big note section about delayed marketing date. This has become a huge issue. Have any of you seen the signs for coming soon? Coming soon. So there were agents that were putting a coming soon sign on the house, and that coming soon sign was on the house for 2 or 3 months. And in the meantime, people were like, when are we going to be able to see this house? Why do we want to look at that house? Well, it's coming soon. Well, when soon? So they had to develop some new rules, but the important thing here is that what also happens sometimes is they would put a coming soon sign up, and then the day that it was listed, it would be sold. Where did that buyer come from? Well, the listing agent, maybe they knew somebody that was a perfect buyer for that house. It was never in the public eye. It was never available for everybody to see. So nobody else had a chance to even show it. It's what we would call a pocket listing. That is, the listing agent was trying to, sell it to their own buyer or a buyer in their firm. And that's illegal. So they've tried to make it very clear to people that if it's coming soon, nobody can see the house. They can't show the house until the marketing date, right? Until the date where you see commencement of marketing. And there's a little blank there that says delayed marketing date. Sometimes you list a house, they fill out all the paperwork, but they still need to shampoo the carpet or something like that. So you say, fine, when do you think you'll be ready for people to walk in? And they say, next Tuesday. So that's the date that you put in there. And you don't put the sign up until they're ready to go. Anything else?
Internet advertising, is that new?
Internet. They didn't have that back then?
Is it in there?
Yeah,
Never mind then.
they did have
Go
that.
ahead, what else is new?
On number 12, part C, they added the section, the third, number 3. And the book is on 2 sections under C.
Okay, yeah, so, here so we're in section 12, letter C, triple I. Seller authorizes and directs any owners association or any management company in the owners association to release to the firm true and accurate copies of the following items affecting the property, including any amendments. The reason why this was added is that what was happening is property management companies would, we would call and say, I'm listing this house and I'd like to get a copy of the homeowners association restrictive covenants. And they'd say, well, we don't have permission to give you that. And so you'd have to go back and, they'd write a letter to the management company or whatever, and it got just a big hassle. So what they did was they just wrote it right into the contract, so you can show them you have permission to get all that. All right, how about 13 through 16? You know any differences?
Section 19.
Section 19? No? Yeah. So section 19 has the big wire fraud warning. It's become a huge issue. We didn't really have it a couple of years ago so much. What's happening is, let's say you're a few days out from closing, the buyer gets an email from the attorney, and it says, here's the wiring instructions to send your down payment to the closing. So the buyer goes to their bank, they give them the wiring instructions they got from this email from the attorney, and it goes to wire the money to the attorney. They get to the closing, and the attorney says, well, we need your down payment money. And the buyer says, well, I wired it to you. And they say, no, you didn't wire it to us. And they said, well, I got an email from you. I said, no, it wasn't from us. So somebody has basically mimicked the email from an attorney, and they've sent this money. Sometimes, like, it's a cash deal. So $200,000 house, the buyer is sending $200,000 to the attorney, and it never gets to the attorney. That money goes directly from wherever they wired it to an offshore account somewhere, and it is gone. So it's a really awful situation. So this warning is there to make sure that everybody is aware. Don't believe any kind of email or message. You need to verify with the attorney's office or with your realtor. They've mimicked realtors' emails as well. Say, here's where you need to send the money. Love, Wayne. And people have gotten duped by this, so it's a critical issue. Other changes. Anything else you find? There probably are a number of other ones in there. I didn't go through all of them. But there are changes every year, and you want to make sure that you're up on it. Now, for the purposes of the test, you're not going to be responsible for what's different about these contracts. But you do need to be aware of what the sections of the contract have to do, what's involved in the contract. So we're going to talk about that contract. We'll spend a little bit of time tonight, and then we'll finish it up tomorrow. So again, we left off with with an agency contract of various flavors. And talk about that. What type of which type of an agency contract is not in writing and is to be avoided? Remember that? Yes, implied, right. That is by the conduct of the agent. They're acting like they have a buyer's agency or a seller's agency, and it is to be avoided. It's actually. So here's another question. Is a contract for the sale of a home an agency contract? Is a contract for the sale of a home an agency contract?
No, it's the firm.
So a contract for sale of a home is between
Buyer and seller.
the buyer and the seller.
Mm.
So who would be the principal and who would be the agent? Doesn't work, does it? Because the buyer surely isn't working for the seller. Seller's not working for the buyer. It is not an agency relationship, sales contract. It's between the seller and the buyer. So we want to make sure that we have all the elements of an agency contract signed by all parties. Includes the broker's real estate license number. And now we include the agency license number as well. Has to have a definite termination date and then that non-discrimination provision as well. Has to have all of that. What's the most important thing to the broker to have in that agency agreement? Yeah.
Money.
How much am I gonna get paid? Can you add a statement about your commission into a sales contract?
No.
So, commission is between the firm and the seller, right? The contract for sale of the house is between the buyer and the seller. It has nothing to do with the commission. So, I did have a buyer come to an open house one time. He says, how much are you getting paid for selling this house? I said, well, that's between my firm and the seller. And he said, well, I want you to reduce your commission, and I'll make an offer on the house. So I said, well, the commission is between the seller and the firm. It has nothing to do with what you offer for the house. Well, if you won't tell me what you're making, then I'm not gonna make an offer. Okay, that's fine, up to you. But the commission has nothing to do with the offer. Because the firm is not a party to the contract. All right, so you passed your license exam. Now, you ready to list houses? She's shaking her head, yeah, I'm ready. Not quite. What has to happen first? You have to associate yourself with a firm, right? Right? So we've got to have an active license, which means you're gonna have to get yourself connected to a firm. So you gotta have a BIC, because you're gonna be a provisional broker. And after the first year, or rather, the first year you don't have to do, CE and all that sort of thing, but in subsequent years, you have to pay the renewal fee. You have to have 8 hours of CE, which means 4 hours of update and 4 hours of some elective. And you have to complete 30 hours of post-licensing for the next 3 years, 3 years. Total of 90 hours. So now are you ready to list and sell houses? You're pretty close, right? Now all you need is clients. So you need a buyer or a seller. So how are you gonna get a buyer or a seller? Convince your relatives to work with you, right? So you're gonna go out and find that person that wants to sell their house and get a listing agreement. When I first went into business, my broker in charge took me into what we call the bullpen, which was a room kind of like this with a bunch of desks, with a phone on each desk. And in one of the drawers was something called a phone book. Now, some of you have never seen a phone book because you're too young, but a phone book was something that looked about like this,
There's nobody who lives.
that had everybody's phone number in it, right? So she put the phone book in front of me and she said, you know, pick a letter and start there, and you know, just take your finger and whatever name you land on, start there, and you pick up the phone and you call that person and you say, hi, this is Wayne Young from Century 21 LE Properties. I'm just wondering if you thought about buying or selling a home. Hello? Hello? Thank you. Next. Hi, this is Wayne Young from LE. And you would do this for hours at a time. Cold calling, what we used to call it. And they had it all calculated out. It was like 1 out of every 400 cold calls you would get a yes. You know, so, you know, finally somebody would say, yeah, I was kind of thinking about selling my house. Do you do that? Yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And you hang up the phone and you go, oh my gosh, I forgot to make a ring, you know, make a date or anything. So you call them back. But that's how we started out, is with cold calling. I used to have, when I first started, I had a picture of a laptop computer in front of me. And that was my incentive. I was going to work until I earned enough commission to buy a laptop computer. So, can we still do that? Can we pick up the phone and just randomly call anybody?
No.
Why not?
Do not call.
We have a do not call list. You know, really the easiest way to get clients is to steal them from other agents. But I don't suggest it, because the Realtor Code of Ethics, Article 16 says it prohibits a member of the National Association of Realtors from solicitation of business from a consumer that is party to an active exclusive agency agreement with another realtor. So it's against the rules. But wait, there's more. What if I'm not a member of the National Association of Realtors? Can I steal clients from somebody else? Well, I wouldn't be breaking the Realtor Code of Ethics because I'm not a realtor. Right? If I don't belong to the National Association of Realtors, I'm not a realtor. I'm just a broker. So I wouldn't be breaking this ethics rule because I'm not a member of that association. However, if you're not a member, you can still be sued for tortious interference with contractual relations. It sounds like, I don't know, coitus interruptus or something. I think it's just not right. I wouldn't want to be accused of tortious interference with contractual relations. Stealing someone else's clients is just bad for business. Because, you know, in this business, we are going to be working with the same agents again. So somebody brings you a buyer to your listing, and then the next time you have a buyer for their listing. So you don't want to be stealing other people's clients, because you're probably going to see that person again and need to work on it. You know, every once in a while I'm working on a deal with another agent, and they act like, you know, this is a battle. you know, my client versus your client, and I'm gonna win this for my client. It doesn't need to be that way. You know, we have the same goal in mind, to get a deal worked out that benefits both the buyer and the seller. And if it becomes a battle, then sometimes people's feelings get hurt, and, you know, the whole thing blows up. So it's really important to have good relations with the other brokers in town, because it's very likely that they're gonna help you to get this sale done. So what if I'm you know, in the grocery store, and somebody comes up to me and says, you know, Wayne, I'm working with John Smith over at Keller Williams, and he's doing a lousy job for me. I want you to be my listing agent. Well, I can't, you know, say, you're right, John's a really lousy agent. Why don't you come over and sign some paperwork? Remember that the agency agreement is a bilateral agreement, so they can't just terminate unilateral by themselves. So, probably the best route is to go and talk to the bank, right? Suggest that they talk to the broker in charge. The broker in charge is probably not gonna wanna lose this listing for their firm, so maybe they give it to another agent in the office, and that agent pays the first agent a referral fee or something. They try to work it out. Or they might charge a cancellation fee. That's okay. But the most important thing is that you don't solicit business from somebody else's client.
Wayne, but once that listing agreement ends, they can come to you, right? Once it ends?
Say that again?
Once their listing.
Once it's expired, yeah, absolutely, they're done. Right. And in fact, you will see in the contract, look at number 1, section B, effective date. It says the property is currently listed for sale exclusively with another real estate firm. The seller represents the current listing agreement expires on blank. So it expires in a week. You put that date in there. The effective date of this agreement shall commence immediately upon the expiration of the current listing agreement. So, and it goes on to say, Article 16 of the Code of Ethics shall not engage in any practice to take any action inconsistent with exclusive representation or exclusive brokerage relationship agreements that other realtors have with their clients. So we don't want to poach their clients. But if they say that they don't want to work with them anymore, they can. So the Do Not Call Registry, how many of you are on the Do Not Call Registry? You should all have your hands up. Because otherwise you're getting calls all the time.
Get them anyway.
You get them anyway, that's right. So the Do Not Call Registry doesn't prohibit political calls or charity or the IRS or bill collecting agencies and so forth, but they do protect you from some sales calls. Now they figure out other ways, hi, this is Wayne Young. I'm taking a survey on whether people are ready to list their house or not. But if you are making sales calls, you need to make sure that somebody is not on the Do Not Call Registry before you call. And there's the telemarketing.donotcall.gov if you're going to be telemarketing, which is what this is. You better check that to make sure that they're not on the Do Not Call list. If you want to see whether you're on the Do Not Call list or sign up for it, donotcall.gov is where you want to go. So if they're on the Do Not Call list, there are ways that you can call them. One is that they've given you permission. So if they're a friend or they have a business relationship, let's say you sold their house, you have 18 months from that business relationship to continue to call them. If they call you and say, I wanted to get some information about the house. You have 3 months of permission to call them. But if they say no at any point, you have to stop calling. And you have to check the registry every 30 days or so to check to see if they're on, if they weren't on the do not call list, but then they sign up, if it's after 30 days, you can get in trouble. And look at these penalties. The federal penalty is $11,000 per call. So if I went through, you know, all the A's in the phone book, that could be really expensive. Right? And in North Carolina, an additional $500 to $5,000 per call. So that's pretty hefty. And I think we will stop right there because we just had enough. I thank you for your attention tonight. I know it's a long night, but guess what? We get to do it again tomorrow night. Everybody initial the sign-out sheet? All right. Have a great evening. Be safe. Be careful going home. It might still be raining.